Hi, and welcome to Deep Leadership. I'm your host, John Rennie. Today I'm talking with Clint Padgett, a Navy veteran and one of the most respected voices in project leadership. He's led mission critical initiatives for some of the biggest brands in the world. What stood out to me was how he rewrites the way teams communicate, collaborate, and avoid the silent failures that sink projects. What he shared made me rethink how real conversations, not software or dashboards, actually drive results. Now, if you want to be a better leader and have more success, listen to this important conversation. So, are you ready to dive in? Let's get started. Today, I'm joined by Clint Padgett. Clint is a Navy veteran, accomplished CEO, best-selling Forbes book author, and one of the most respected voices in project management and leadership today. Clint is the president and CEO of Project Success, Inc., a global consultancy that's been helping Fortune 500 companies plan and deliver mission-critical initiatives for over 40 years. Under his guidance, his company has helped with major initiatives around the world, including Coca-Cola's activation of the Olympic Games and FIFA World Cup. He's also the author of two impactful books, The Project Success Method and How Teams Triumph. He also hosts the popular Conversations with Clinton M. Padgett podcast, where he interviews leaders on what it really takes to drive performance, clarity, and commitment on teams. And I'm excited to have him on the show to learn from his deep experience. So, Clint, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, John. Appreciate it.
It is an honor to have you on the podcast, sir, and another Navy veteran. So I salute you and thanks for your service. And we talked a little bit about that before we pressed record. So we have a similar background there. So I appreciate your service and your commitment to the Navy. So I love it.
Well, I was
But
up on top and you were down below, so we're a little bit different, but same Navy, yeah.
we would say you were a target, right? In fact, you were on an
Yeah.
aircraft carrier, which is a very large target, right?
Large target.
So I love it. I love it. So, I mean, your work is around project management. You do a lot of things, but your work is around project management. And one of the things that really struck me when I was looking at your material is you talk about the importance of people in projects. And I always say that leadership is a people business. And I love that you start off talking about the importance of people. So, but the problem is we can sometimes get caught up in our plans, caught up in our the deadlines, trying to get things done on time. How can we strike the right balance between managing people, managing the process, and getting projects done on time?
Well, I think that if you surround yourself with the right people and you put in place processes that they can follow and make the projects their own, you're going to be successful in the end of the project. I've been doing this job now for over 30 years, and I would argue I've never had a failed project because usually in the first week, the team is able to say, this is not something we can even deliver on. So we can try to do it and probably fail, or I could tell you right now, I being the team, we can't make this happen. Or we could, but these are the things we need from you instead. So I think if you put a process in place, but then it comes back to what the team does. You want the team to build their plan for their project. They have the expertise, they have the knowledge. You give them the goal and the objective, but then the team has to build the plan to get there. And I think that's what's so important and why people matter.
Yeah, I love that the idea that give them ownership, let them bring their expertise. Do you find though that the leader's role is sometimes to minimize the conflicts, or sometimes even people with the same goal in mind and with the best intentions will get cross-threaded sometimes? And is that the role of the leader to sort of say, okay, guys, let's have this discussion, let's work this thing out, right?
I think that's key actually, because this was pre-pandemic as well, but certainly the pandemic really exacerbated this everybody remote and avoid maybe avoid conflict, but I say just avoid conversation altogether. That's what they want to do, right? They want to. You think about it, people are quite happy to send emails, post something on Slack or Jira, send a text message, and not quite so happy to actually pick up the phone or jump on a Zoom call or actually, I don't know, heaven forbid, walk down the hallway and talk to your coworker about something. And I think the reason they do that is I want to check things off my to-do list. As a human being, I want to get that off my plate. And I know that if I can just send you an email saying it's done, I hope I never hear from you again.
Mm.
As opposed to if I actually walk down the hallway and say, hey, John, here's what I did. I think we're done now, right? And you say, well, actually, Clint, that's not what I wanted at all. You need to go do this, this, and this now. Not only is it not checked off my list, I have five more things. So I think people tend to avoid these conversations because they want to just say it's done and move on. I also think that some people don't like that conversations do foster conflict at times. And some people, some of us love conflict and some of us don't. I've been on podcasts where I was kind of the anti-AI guy, and I would tell them, look, I'm happy to come on the podcast and talk to you, but if it's going to be confrontational, then I'm out. But if you want to
Hmm.
have a dialogue, I'm happy to have a conversation. And so I think if you can have those conversations, force those conversations, and you can sometimes have conflict, absolutely, but you want that because what you don't want is two people with opposing views supposedly working on the project together, pulling in different directions. I want to get them in the room. And at the very beginning, you say go north, you say go south, why? And as a group, we'll decide which direction to go. And then I need you to come along with me. Even if you don't agree with the direction we're going, I need you to help support us as we move in that direction. So you want this process to bubble this conflict up so you can get it out of the way and move on to something that's more important.
Yeah, I think that's very important. I was just going to ask you, some of the projects you deal with are highly complex. I mean, we talked before we press recording. I've been involved in a number of different projects, but never to the complexity of some of the ones you dealt with. When you're dealing with large groups of peoples with different personalities, backgrounds, maybe even different from different places in the world with different cultural backgrounds, does that make that extra difficult because of all the uniqueness that people bring to the equation, especially about you're talking about AI, right? AI, I think one of the things about the most amazing thing is humans are very unique and special, and we're not predictable. And I think that makes do you find that to be a bigger challenge with these large global projects that you work on?
So the bigger the team, obviously, the more complex. It's for certain. That's a statement we can make. I do think when you add the cultural aspect, that could also be challenging. Was in done some projects in Japan and was having a conversation with someone, and they're looking at me, nodding their head, going, "Hi, hi, hi." So to me, I'm thinking they're understanding what I'm saying and agreeing to it. And then I found out later, "Hi" doesn't mean I agree. It just means that I understand you're speaking words and I understand those words, but I'm not agreeing with you. I'm just saying I understand. And
Yeah.
the other one was, I'm told, I don't know if this is true. I'm told there's no word for no in the Japanese language. So they won't tell you no. What they will say is that will be difficult, which means it ain't never gonna freaking happen, right? But they don't want to say no. So I think when you add the cultural aspect, you have to understand the different cultures. Some people will not speak if the boss is in the room because that's what the culture dictates. Other people are operate from a culture of the more challenging you can be, the better, the more your stock rises. So to me, it's all about having the conversation and trying to understand who's talking and what their take is. And the people that don't want to talk, you try to bring information out of them. And the people that are quite happy to chat away, kind of slow them down a little bit. But because at the end, we want everybody's opinion to be heard so we can all move in the same direction.
I think it's a really important point you point out. I know I talk a lot about the idea of the value of introverts, because oftentimes the introverts I find that they've been thinking while other people have been talking. So I'm very sensitive to make sure that the quiet people get heard. And so I love that you just pointed out that we want to make sure we get the opinions of everybody in the room. So that's a really important point.
I think you can even do that. Certainly, if we do stay remote and hybrid, these things, especially if it's hybrid, right? Where you got people in the room and you got two or three people that are dialed in. One of my pet peeves is people in the room do all the talking. At the very end of the call, you go, "Okay, Bob, on the phone, you got anything to add?" And of course, Bob doesn't because he's in minute 44, and
Yeah.
all the good ideas have been used. So I like to mix it up and start the call with, "Okay, we got Bob and Joe on the phone, and Joe, Bob, what do y'all think?" And so they get to have the first take. And then to your point, the introverts, they do a lot of thinking, and you have to. It's hard, but you've got to get information out of them because they usually have value to add. And sometimes being remote does help the introverts because now they're if you're a short person and the 6'7" guy is always doing all the
Yeah.
talking,
Yeah.
it kind of equalizes you, right? When you're so I think because everybody's just a little talking head on the screen.
Yeah,
So
everybody's the
I
same size on the screen. I love that point. I heard other people talk about that as well. And the other thing is the chat function too can allow introverts to sort of like put in their words but without speaking aloud. So I think it does help introverts a bit. Yeah.
for sure. But I think
Yeah.
either way, you still need to get everybody's opinions out. And I just know that, as you know, there are always be people that are quite happy to talk, and there are people that,
Yeah.
man, they just don't want to, but they have good information you got to get from them.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think it's so important. You use this phrase which I love called "shift the worry curve." Now, can you explain what that means? Because I think I know what it means, but tell us what shift the worry curve means, and then how do you use that to help teams stay on track?
So I'll try to summarize this because this could be quite lengthy topic all by itself. But shift the worry curve comes about from you think about how people do projects just traditionally out of the box, right? And what'll happen is the boss, the senior vice president, will call a meeting and tell the team, "Hey, we got this big project. You guys are all on it. That's why you're here. You all know your jobs. Go make it happen. I want to see some real teamwork on this, right?" And so you walk into that meeting, you already have five other projects on your plate in various stages of completion. Some are just starting, some in the middle, some are hopefully ending soon. And now you walk out of the meeting an hour later with project number six. And so I always ask people, how worried do you think the average person is about project number six when they walk out of the room? And the answer is usually not very worried because they've got a year. Let's say it's a year-long project. They got a year to do it, and all they know is they're on the team. And so there's no plan. There's no plan to get a plan. It's just this great nebulous thing. I got a year to do it. I'm pretty sure I could do it in a year. I'm confident in my own abilities. But I got these other five projects that I've been getting beat up about for weeks and months, and I've got things to do tomorrow and next week. And I'm going to focus on those. And I'm thinking to myself, I'll eventually, once one of these other projects goes away, I could pick this one up. So what ends up happening in that model is the first phase we called uninformed optimism because I don't know enough to be scared. It's just this great nebulous thing that I'm eventually going to get to. And then as time progresses, maybe you're halfway through the project timeline, and you get this bad feeling that man, I was pretty confident I get it done in a year. I'm not sure I can get it all done in 6 months, which is all I have left. This is where you see your team members walking down the hallway, and you hope they don't bring up the project. And if they do, you hope they also haven't worked on it because you haven't worked on it. And as the joke goes, it's okay to be late as long as John is more late, right? You just don't
Yeah,
want to be
don't be
you
the
don't want to be the
exactly
most late person, right?
right.
So that's called vague concern. You got this bad feeling in the pit of your stomach, your spidey sense of tingling telling you things are not well, but you have no plan to measure it against, so you can't confirm you're late. Then, of course, you move into the final phase, which is called panic. And in the panic phase of the project, you probably finish late. Your costs go through the roof because you have to do incredibly expensive things to solve your problems, and your quality suffers because rather than doing a full color video and doing training before the rollout, you have to put it out there and do ad hoc training after the fact. So quality suffers. And so the shift the worry curve idea comes from if you think about, you can't see that if you're listening on the podcast, but you have a flat line that kind of grows slowly, and then there's this big hump at the end, like you're bulldozing, right? That's all the worry. You got pushed into the end where the panic phase is. If you shift the worry curve, you're going to push some of that worry back upstream where it actually belongs. So you shift the worry curve by having a planning session where you carve out 2 or 3 days, which I know is painful because you got five other projects. What we learned is if you spend those 2 or 3 days together planning, you're going to have a better plan. You're going to force these conversations we were talking about having to happen. You're going to force those, get a clear direction to everybody what they're going to do. People are going to build their plan for their project, to which, to use your word, where they're going to be accountable, right? Which is what we want because I can't make them do it necessarily if I'm in a matrix organization. So you get a much more robust plan. And the real beauty of that is our over 40 years, we've been around for 40 years doing this, and our findings has been that about 10% of the activities in a given project will be critical. And without getting too technical, it means those are the 10% that have to be done on time or the project will be late. Well, the secret sauce is that means 90% can be late by at least a day or more.
Mm.
And so if I can know which 10% I have to get done on Tuesday of next week and which other ones I can move until I have more time, then my workload actually gets smoother and I get higher quality in the end. So that's an investment we make on the front end to shift the worry curve so we never hit the panic phase.
I love that. And you just said something that's really powerful too, is the idea that you're working on the right things, right? And if you're working on the right things, then you actually have less work to do than if everything is a priority. So I think doing that hard work up front tells you what's truly important. What is the critical chain? What is the critical items in this particular project to make sure that those get the attention they need so they don't get neglected. So it actually helps you it actually makes your work less because you know exactly what you need to be working on and what's the most important, parts of the project. So I love that technology. So, or that term, because it's such it makes a lot of sense. And the idea that you move the worry up to the front, uh, because I know it's funny. I ran a manufacturing plant, my first manufacturing plant. One of the things I had to fix was we used to ship everything at the end of the month. So I would look at our cumulative monthly shipments, and it was always a hockey stick. The last 3 days of the month we shipped everything out, and I said we need to stop this. And they're like, "What do you mean we have to stop this? This is what we've been doing for 40 years at this plant." I was like, "Well, we need to stop it. It's stupid, because the quality suffers. Everybody's running around. There's lots of overtime. There's panic. The quality suffers. All that because we're shipping everything the last 3 days of the month." And so we held people accountable, and we would say, "What are we getting done every day for the month?" And we would measure the curves, and over time the curves went from hockey sticks to being straight lines, and it was because
Mm-hmm.
we focused on shipping every day. So every day was important, not just the last 3 days. And so it made our life actually easier once we sorted that out. So it's not project management, but a similar situation where the worry was always at the end, the panic was at the end, and everything suffered at the end because we were trying to do too much. So, and I
It's
see
still
that with
human
projects.
nature.
Yeah, it's human nature, right? Yeah. Yeah,
Yep.
if something's a year, like you said, if you're a project, the deadline's in a year from now, you just file that in the back of not important, right? I've got other things that are more urgent right now, right? Yeah.
And then of course they roll their eyes because they're told it's a top priority. But when I'm teaching classes, there might be 50 people in the room, and I always start the class off by saying, "How many of you work in a multi-project environment?" And everybody raises their hand. And the next question is, "How many of your current projects are considered to be top priority?" And everybody just laughs
Yeah.
because they're all top priority. But the truth of the matter is that they're all top priority. None of them are. They're the same priority.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's
Yep.
what we're talking about is just inside of a project, there is a prioritization of there's a sequence, which is the math, which you see behind me on in the background. But there's also this is what I have to get done today, or the project's going to be late in a year,
Yeah.
versus there are 30 things on my to-do list today. I can't get all 30 done. This will help me understand which five I can get done, and those are the five I should do.
Yep. Yep. No, it makes so much sense. And spending that time is very, very important. And in understanding that priority, that's important. So interesting. We talked about earlier, you have a electrical engineering background. I have a mechanical engineering background. So similar, we come from technical backgrounds, but then you've developed a strong focus on people. So how did you build that side of your leadership skill sets? Because I think engineers, maybe accountants, maybe we're not known as being people, if that's the right term. So where did you develop your that side of your leadership skills?
So it started early, actually. My dad was a serial entrepreneur in Orangeburg, where I grew up in South Carolina, and he was always starting businesses. So from the time I could walk, I was working in those businesses. Even at my earliest memory ever was probably 4 years old, and I was picking up trash in the parking lot and doing that kind of stuff. And you end up talking to people, and it's part of your if you're a shopkeeper, let's say, whatever the business is, if you're the person they interact with the client, then you're talking. And I think it just kind of helped me grow that side. And then I've always liked people. I've always found people interesting. I like talking to people. And just I also like math, so that was always interesting. Those two things kind of don't always go together, which is one of the things I try to do with the second book and also with the podcast is try to get people that are, and as engineers we could talk bad about ourselves because we are one, right?
Yeah.
It's we don't have necessarily we don't enjoy being around people as much, if stereotypically, as some people do, and so we're not necessarily all gregarious like your typical marketing salesperson might be. And so what I found over my career was I saw a tendency of these because what would happen is a really smart technical person would get promoted or demoted. You'd pick the word you like the best to be the project manager of the next project. And
Yep.
because they hated meetings and hated dealing with people, they would say, I would hear this, "I'm going to save the team time. I'm going to go off and build a plan for them."
Mm.
And so they would project things they didn't like onto the overall team. And you can't run a project like that unless it's a team of one. You can't. You need the team because we all know that you could be the smartest person in the room, but the collective will still be smarter than you are. So we need the team to build their project, and so we need them to be participative. Because when I talk to people, what people will say, "I hate project management." One of the reasons I find is their whole life of project management, their whole life experience of working at Acme Corporation for 20 years, is that Joe went off by himself and built the plan without my input. Apparently, use a random number generator to pick the durations because they're not based anywhere on reality. Assign them to me, and then is holding me accountable for the schedule that's not based on reality without my input. Well, I wouldn't want to do project management either. That's a terrible situation, right?
Mm.
And so I wanted to try to, we have to fix that because just because you euphemistically, you don't like meetings doesn't mean you shouldn't have them. There are things you can do to make them more palatable, make them shorter, make them more efficient. Absolutely. But you still need to have them. And that's why I've kind of made this mantra of people matter, but you got to get people together. Got to get them in
Mm.
a room.
I love that you bring that up because I think I see sometimes leaders will do that. So they have goals for the year and things they want to get done. And so they set up everything, all the targets and the goals and the plans for the year in their office by themselves instead of working with their team. And I was always big on bringing my leadership team together and say, okay, this is how we did last year. These generally the idea where we want to go this, this coming year. What are we doing right? What are we doing wrong? What's our problems? And one of the things we always would discuss in these annual planning sessions was we had too many priorities. That was always the thing, that we had way too many things. And so one of the things we were trying to do, and we got better at it over time, was to say, what are we going to say no to this year? And I think that was, and one of the things we also did, I gave my leadership team permission. We're going to fire one customer every year. So who's the customer we hate the most, and we're going to get rid of them this year. And we did that, and I fired $1 million customer one time because we weren't making any money. We're spending a lot of time and effort trying to make them happy. They would lie to us, and my team said we need to fire them, and I'm like, okay, and we fired them, and we ended up finding, because it was something it was their wishes. They wanted to get it done. They found other customers to take up that slack. And so, but I think you're right. It's important to involve people. So it's not like a project plan coming down from on high that nobody has had any input to. Right. And
And
I saw that a lot, in corporate, where stuff would just come in from on high. And you're like, where did this come from?
and I'll
SAP implementations were always that way. They came from
oh,
corporate, and you're like, wait, where is this coming from? you know?
this is really going to help us, really.
Yeah, exactly. So, I'd be a general manager of a plant. They come in and we're going to do your, change over to SIP, and here's the project plan. I'm like, you haven't even talked to me yet. You have no idea how we use our ERP systems here, So it was always a challenge. Yeah.
And,
So I
I'll
think
bet when you
involving
fired that
people.
customer, you probably saw your team was just so engaged after that because we've done that before as well. Not $1 million client, but we definitely turned down some serious 7-figure work, 6-figure work,
Yeah.
and because it wasn't a good fit, and I didn't think we could be successful doing it. And my team they love that. They like he won't take on a project just to make revenue. And that's important because that's you're holding up to what you believe is to be
Yeah.
true and dear.
And you're saying that people are more important than this customer. Yeah. And
Yeah, absolutely.
my team are more important than this $1 million customer. Yeah. So you're actually saying people are a priority. One of the things I was interested to get your take on it. I have a feeling, I have a theory. I don't know if it's a theory. See what your take on it. That I think as engineers, we maybe have a system thinking mindset. So we see people as part of the system. And so the complexity of people is very interesting to us. So we have all these different unique personalities. We put them in a room and we have to sort of make them work. And it's like I'm a mechanical engineer. It's like a machine all having to work together. The gears have to mesh. And so I think it's a challenge that I think is difficult, but it seems like it needs system thinking to solve it. And I don't know if that's why I've talked to a lot of engineers who've gotten into the leadership world, and I just wonder if the system thinking has something to do with it. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
I haven't really thought about it that way. That's interesting take on it. What I observationally have seen is we have these projects that involve engineering and marketing, let's say, and we kick the sessions off. And what I will observe is all the engineers will sit together on one side of the room because
Mm,
they all speak the same language. They all think Dilbert is hilarious. They all had to take calculus in college. It's a shared badge of honor.
yeah.
And they get each other, right? They get each other. And then there'll be literally a line of empty chairs, and then all the marketing people sit on the other side. And it's because they don't speak the same language, so they
Mm,
don't understand each other. And I like to play stereotypes here as well. And I'll say, let me play the role of the engineer first and say, what do you marketing people do? You sit around and have these meetings and talk a lot, but at the end of the day, what have you actually done? When I leave the office, you can see the code that I've written. You can
mm,
hold the part that I've designed. It's tactile. You can see it, touch it, feel it. You guys just meet and talk about big fluffy clouds and strategy, blah, blah, blah. And then I switch hats to go to the marketing side and say, well, wow, Clint, I didn't realize you had such a low opinion of the value we add, but you need us to give you direction because you engineers are so far down in the weeds. that if you didn't have us giving you direction, you'd run into the wall or run off the cliff like the lemurs, right? So you need us. And I always, in my head, I'm always thinking Jack Nicholson, you need us on that wall, right? From A Few Good Men.
Yes.
But the truth of the matter is that a project involves both
Yeah.
sides.
Yeah.
And if you're a for-profit company and engineering is making products there's no market for, you're not making money.
There you
And
go.
if marketing is selling stuff you can't actually develop and design, you're not making money. So the only way to make money is to pull the people out of the clouds down a bit, pull the people like me up out of the weeds a little bit, put us on the same plane to have a conversation about the project, what is doable and what is not doable without inventing the flux capacitor.
I love that. That's such a great, concise answer because I think it's a very important thing. And I would add to that is never let engineers name a product. That's one thing I've learned over 30 years and seeing it. Whenever engineers name a product, it's always just weird and it never takes off. So
It's the EWC 17. It's crystal clear what this is. Come on.
we had a BTSB in one of my companies. And I asked what it stood for, and they said better than sliced bread. And I was like, no, it does no. Please tell me that's not it. And we
Well,
went to market.
this will definitely go back in time. Most people won't get this, but if you were old enough, there was a show on TV called Hee Haw,
Yeah.
and there was one of the this was back people used landlines and only 5 digits was BR541. BR549 was one of the phone numbers you would call in Hee Haw. Well, it just so happened on the USS America, the carrier that I was on, the boiler room was you called them was BR549.
Oh,
So it
that's
was just
funny.
so funny. But at least I had a reason. Boiler room BR
Yeah,
549. It made sense.
it made sense. Yeah.
It wasn't BTB, BTSB.
PTSB. Yeah, true story. That is a true story. And there might be someone on this phone, this call that remembers that, or that's listening to this podcast that remembers that. So it was a real product. So
If I could touch on one thing before you go on,
yeah.
going back to an earlier point you made, when you deliver things from on high, here's the challenge. This is another reason that I would advocate for having a conversation. If you ever played the game telephone when you were a kid,
Mm,
and if you don't know what this is, basically telephone is a game where kids sit around and one kid has a secret, he whispers to the second kid, who then whispers that secret on down the line, 5, 6 kids later. The fun of the game is, of course, that what the sixth person thinks the secret is not remotely close to what the first person said, right? And so that happens in the business world as well. And what happens is you give me what you clearly, you're the senior executive vice president, and you clearly know what you're talking about. You give me this information through an email or a text message, or maybe it's even a video call where you just say, here's what we're doing, and you're off, right? But then I hear that message through my biases, through the way that I define terms. Frankly, whether I'm having a bad day or not might impact how I hear your message. And then when I communicate that message to somebody else, they hear it through their biases and through their terminologies, and whether they're having a bad day. And so it's no surprise that the message gets mangled. What would solve the telephone game and would make it not as much fun, but what would actually solve the business issues that we have is when I have this message I give you, I need to go back and say, okay, now what did you hear me say? What do
mm,
you think? By having this dialogue, right? This is why I love the definition of a conversation. It's an oral exchange of information. It's a dialogue. So now I'm gaining understanding of what it is you actually want. And so if you say, Clint, turn left, I can say turn left, which turn left seems clear, right? But turn left like at this driveway, at that stop sign or that stop light up there. Which left do you want me to take? Because there's many lefts in my mind. In your left, it was clear. In your mind, it was clear. There's this whichever left it was, right? By
mm.
having this dialogue, now my message is clear as it moves through the organization and stays much more on point.
Yeah, yeah. I mentioned in one of my books the idea, in the Navy we had verbatim repeat back, so anytime there was a critical order, it was repeated back, left full rudder, steady course 250. And you say left full rudder, steady course 250. Aye, sir. So so the leader knows that the information was received, it's communicated back, so there's understanding. And then we would even when the submarine was on the surface, we'd actually look back to make sure the rudder did turn in the right direction. So you had verbal and visual, representation that the order was heard and it was carried out. Of course, these are critical missions. We're in a narrow channel. This is very important. But I often say that sometimes, we as leaders need to just check for clarification, make sure people understand what we've asked them to do before they go and do it. Because oftentimes they'll run off, say, yes, sir, I got it, no problem. And they have a complete misunderstanding of what their task was. So I think the idea of communicating and make sure that people have understand what their role is, or the objective is, and they can repeat it back in their own words. Okay, what is it that you're going to be doing? I think that's a way to say, okay, the telephone game, what did you hear, and what are you going to be doing based on what you, so because it has to go through all their filters before it goes in their brain. So I think you're right. I think that's something that we never in a situation in the civilian world where we need to have verbatim repeat back, but I think checking for clarification is an important leadership role as well, right?
Yeah, I call them clarifying questions. What are the clarifying questions you need to ask to make sure it's locked in your head the way that I intended?
Yeah, no, I think that makes so much sense. Well, Clint, this has been a fantastic conversation. What final message would you like to leave with our listeners now?
I think we just hit on it, and that is I have a conversation. Don't be afraid to pick up the phone. Don't if you're sending back multiple emails, this probably could be solved in a 30-second phone call. To pick up the phone, walk down the hallway, heaven forbid, but have a conversation with people. Don't rely on just the technology to send a one-way communication so it's off your plate. Have the conversation so you have true understanding.
I love that. It's so important. We've learned on this podcast. We have a guest on talking about how oftentimes words get confused. Our written language is not a perfect way to communicate. So get on the phone, get on face to face, get on a Zoom call and sort out. And don't think that your cleverly written email is going to get anything done. So it is not getting anything done. So it's just filling up somebody's inbox. So I love
Agreed.
that. That's such a great message. Clint, how can our listeners find out more about you, your company, your podcast, your books?
Yeah, so the company is projectsuccess.com, not projectsuccess.org. That's a whole different, that helps school kids. So that's not us. We get emails all the time saying, how can I help my child get into this college? I don't know, but it's not us. So projectsuccess.com. You can go on my personal brand website to more about speaking roles at clintpadgett.com. Of course, my books are on Amazon, and then you can listen to the podcast, the conversation on your favorite podcasting service.
Fantastic. We're going to put links in the show notes for all of Clint's resources. And again, listeners, if you listen to this podcast and there's some things that really stood out, especially in the world of project management, and maybe you're struggling there, maybe you've got project managers who like to do the work inside of their own office and then put it out to their teams, and your teams are struggling. Clint's the guy that's going to help you out. So he's the one that's going to answer your questions, and he is the one that is the expert, and that's why we bring him on the show. So I highly encourage you to follow the links below and check out Clint's work, check out what he does, and yeah, ask him some questions if you've got them. So that's why we have him. He's the expert. So Clint, I want to thank you for coming on the show. Thanks for sharing your expertise and the stories and the wisdoms that you've learned over all these years.
John, it was my pleasure. Thanks for having me, and thanks for your service as well.
Thank you. Well, that is it for today. Thank you for listening to Deep Leadership. If you like this podcast, please subscribe and share so we can continue to build a world with better bosses. Until next time, this is John Rennie saying take care and lead well.